One.
Welcome to the Education Growing Online Career Guidance channel. Today, I'm with an interesting gentleman by the name of Mr. K. Poulten. He's going to tell us briefly about the career that he does, which is risk management. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
How are you doing?
I'm good.
Yeah, COVID has really got us, huh?
COVID is in the rise. Yeah, it's a pandemic, a global one, but yeah.
How much of an effect has it taken in your career?
I would say a lot of risk practitioners or professionals have been caught off guard in that this is something that developed overseas, or as it spun around the world, everybody was like, what's happening? But with risk management, it's all about having the mitigation factors behind every occurrence or event.
Okay.
Events do happen, but if you don't have mitigating factors to actually counteract the impact, then you are doomed. So as risk professionals, we are taught that some risk will eventualize without us identifying them, but as long as we are quick to advise management, to advise whoever needs the information, how to react accordingly. So I would say it has caught us off guard, but we are well on our way of recovering.
That's fantastic. I want to give you a moment here to introduce yourself to our viewers by giving us your name, your career, and what exactly you do in your career.
Okay, thanks for it. My name is Kulakahle Anthony Poulten. So you rightfully said it's K Poulten, but I normally prefer my African name, which was given to me by my mother. My mother is from Bergville in KZN, but then the surname Poulten is my father's. It was Khalid. May his soul rest in peace. So my upbringing was from, I wouldn't say humble as your layman or everybody would say, but it was just a time where life was beginning to form a shape for my family, where my dad started his business and I was growing, hence the name Kulakahle. So they were sort of imparting that blessing on me to say Nkulekahle, because it was the time when my father's business ventures were forming. So career-wise, I studied at DUT for 4 years, which was equivalent to a BTech or a degree, where in a university or in any university, traditional university, you would actually do 3 years to get a degree. So by DUT, because of University of Technology, then you would do 4 years to get the equivalent. So I went in the profession of internal audit. So I'm a qualified internal auditor, but in the midst of the career building and also options that are available in the internal audit space, then I grew fond of risk management as a alternative career to develop. And I think the bug bit me back in 2014, and I never looked back ever since.
Okay.
Yeah, so in a nutshell.
interesting path. But what drew you towards risk management? Is in a sense that what are your interests? What are your skills, talents? You know, what are those core values that drive you, that made you and brought you to risk?
100%. Maybe if I could just begin by explaining briefly with internal audit. Internal audit is what drew me to it is that you sort of help management in the company to identify or also maybe cover all the loopholes that you'd say that on the system in terms of procedures, policies, and so on. But when the risk management bug bit me, what I realized is that I'm not assisting management in identifying and reporting on the deficiencies, but now I'm assisting management to actually cover those deficiencies, or should I say, to have mitigating factors around those deficiencies. So it is the attribute or the skills that you need to think outside of your environment. You need to look at things in a way that would, if tomorrow something has to go wrong, will you be in a position to come out of the situation better than you were when you got into it. So it's all about identifying things that could go wrong and then putting mitigating factors in place to make sure that you are able to continue achieving your objectives. So risk management for me made more sense than internal audit, in that I'm not policing anybody, but I'm assisting management to actually make sure that the objectives of the company are met. Yeah.
Okay, lovely. And then, how important is career pathing to you? Because what we noticed, what helped us create Education Growing Online Ego, was the fact that we saw the difficulties of pupils being able to understand and know what careers they want to do, being able to understand themselves. Would you say that in your time you understood yourself better, or was your school better prepared, or better prepared you to be able to study what you want to study?
Yeah, no. To be honest with you, I wasn't prepared at all. I found myself at grade 11, and then, as you would know, back in the days, I don't know if it's still the case, where you had the Central Applications Office, CAO, where they wanted to gather how many students want university, so you have to apply. So you use your grade 11 results, and in grade 12 you also use those results. So what actually helped me with choosing the career that I'm in now, there is I would say a page in the CAO book which sort of identified you with a particular animal or creature or whatever.
Yes.
So you would have a bee, you'd have an ant, you would have all these animals, and they said, if you answer this sort of question, then you might be belonging to this particular group of or species, and then you choose. So I answered the question that were asked in the book, and then I found myself falling in an ant space. So I had to look at the careers, which is your internal auditor, accounting, anything that has to do with commerce. So that sort of gave me an idea that this is where I want to be. I tried to answer all the other questions differently, but I found that it lands me on something that I cannot do because I don't have the subjects, or I just don't like it at all. So I ended up choosing my career in that way. So, but also my teachers back in high school, they sort of helped me in terms of channeling, to say, if you say you're good in numbers, why don't you look at these? If you say you're good in biology, why don't you look at these? So, but accounting came up as number one, hence I went through the internal audit space. But I could have chosen to go with your accounting to become an accountant and so on. But yeah, internal audit just made sense to me at the time. So yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Yes, the way you grew up, did it play any factor in what you chose exactly? You know, some people will find that, I'll make an example of myself. At home, you have teachers, we have nurses, so generally you'll find that anyone who's coming up has that perception that I need to study to be a teacher, or I need to study to be a nurse. Did that play any factor in your growing up, and where exactly did you grow up?
No, definitely, sir. It played a big factor. As I've said, that in the name that my parents gave me, which is Kulakahle, that my parents' business was starting to take form or shape. So I think also being introduced to a business space as a child, where you see your father struggling, waking up every day, being the last person to come back into the house, making sure that things are working properly, and also coming to the house and then finding your mother trying to balance things and so on. So that sort of played a part in the career which I actually ended up choosing, in that I would want to be in the accounting space. But then when I got to the university, I said, okay, maybe accounting is not really the right one for me. Let me go internal audit. So, but it's all the influence of the parents forming their life around studying a business, and then that's what actually led me to this. And yeah, I just grew up in a very, I would say that the village is is also up north in KZN. There's a small town called Danhauser.
Okay.
Or you can say Danhauser, if you may. But it's just close to Newcastle, and this is where I actually grew up. And if you know the place, it's not really a developed and should I say a town of sort. It's a small town where it developed because there was a train station that was running through, so people would actually come from Joburg forever. That would be they stop on the train, and then they take whatever transport to go home. So that's how it developed, and up until today, we still yet to see one single robot or traffic light in the town. But anyway,
That's
yeah,
another discussion.
yeah, it's another discussion.
Alright.
Yeah.
If you could take us on your high school journey where
Yes.
you select your subject, which I think is grade 9,
Mm.
where you select your subject. Because
Yeah.
in Ego, we're doing a situation where we want to get kids as early as possible. So you get pupils from grade 5 and we grow with them. Because we
Right.
honestly believe that that worry that a person has when they get to grade 9 having to select their subjects, it could be mitigated if we can help you be able to understand what you want to be earlier, or at least give you a couple of options. So if you could take us on your journey of how you picked your subjects, were you prepared at grade 9 for the subjects that you were picking, which led you to the career that you went to, and what subjects are necessary for the career that you ended up into?
Okay. My story is a bit of a funny one. At the time when I was going to high school from primary, my parents sort of took me out from the normal, would say, schools that a child would normally go to, like, you know, the schools at home in a village, and then they took me to a sort of an Indian school, if you can put it that way, which was seen at the time as sort of something that is exclusive or high ranking than a normal school that I would have gone to. So I had to actually really prove myself to the school that I'm worthy of being here. So it meant I have to work extra hard, pick up the grades and the marks and so on. So that helped me when it came to grade 11, which is standard 9, to say, no, the guy is a good performer, so he can be allowed to take, first of all, it was decided for you if you're going to do a subject on a higher grade or a standard grade. So if you're a bad performer, then well, I wouldn't say necessarily. If you were just an average performer, then they would actually decide for you to do your subjects in a standard grade. If you were average to good, then they would give you a chance to actually take higher grades, take subjects in a higher grade. And then also it came to a point whereby they would also decide for you if you're good in commerce subjects or physical science subjects, where you would do your physics, your biology, and so on. So luckily for me, I was never that good in physical subjects, physical science subjects. So I just chose, or the path was chosen for me that I would do commerce, which is something also I wasn't too phased about, which was a right thing for me, which I believe. But for somebody who want to do something else and it was chosen for them, it was a difficult thing. So, but all I can say is, if you are doing good, if you do well in your subjects, no one can tell you where you can or where you can go. You'll be able to actually go to any career you want. And then maybe your last question about which subjects are the ones required for my career. It will be accounting, it will be maths, and it could be any other subjects after that. But the key ones are accounting and mathematics.
Fantastic. Now let's bring it to something that young people in high school and primary look forward to. What people who started working probably really enjoyed varsity. How was your varsity experience? When I ask this question, I mean, besides such the social life, which is important itself, but what were your study regimes? How were the lecturers and the lectures themselves? Did you find it easier to access past papers for exams and tests and assignments?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that question. See, the thing is, at home, I think I was the second person to actually have a tertiary degree or qualification. The first person was my elder sister, and then which every December would accompany her to Durban, back to Newcastle. So you would see Durban. It was so nice. I want to come here. And so the idea was, when I passed my matric, I'd have to go to Durban to actually study. So I actually didn't find it that hard, in that I had a very good relationship with the lectures, also with my fellow students, in that I remember for the 3 years that I was at DUT, I was the class representative. So any issues with the students, I would take it up with the head of department, internal audit. So we had that sort of relationship. So in terms of access to past papers and so on, there were libraries that were open 24/7. There would also be, I think, I wouldn't call it a library, but an internet space at the residence, whatever residence you would stay in. So information was readily available. It's just that you had to use it the way that it would best benefit you. So yeah, I would say at that time, to me, things seems to be information seemed to be of abundance to me. It's a way that I wanted to actually use it. But obviously, there is that social life which we spoke about, where I think most of my peers or most of my I'd say fellow students, they sort of concentrated more into that, which sort of derailed the objective of them being at the university.
Yes.
Yeah, and that can actually prove to be quite costly.
Yes, if you can't find the balance,
Yes.
it is critical.
100%.
Now let's look at the daily life of the profession.
Mm-hmm.
Where can I work when I do it? What do you do on your normal every day? You know, like the 9 to 5. What are the hours? And most importantly, I think for any person, how much do I get paid?
Okay, yeah, no, I guess it always comes down to the bottom line.
Yes,
Yeah.
averages.
Okay. Okay, maybe to start off, as a risk practitioner, you can work almost everywhere because there is risk in everything. Life in itself, there is risk associated to it. So you would have to be, even if you are not a risk practitioner or professional, your own life as a person, not knowing anything about risk, you are a risk manager because you are taking decisions that will benefit or cause your life to take a different approach altogether or direction. So risk management can be done in any organization. You would find that there are risk champions in organizations, which they don't call them risk managers, but you find there are some organizations who have actually have a well-established risk management unit. They've got risk managers, and then also I think the biggest one would be the chief risk officer, which is the ultimate in the risk management space, where you would be in your line as in CFOs and MD levels. So risk management can be done in any company. What a normal day for an internal for a risk manager would look like is you would review risk registers where there are risks that are documented, where management would say, we foresee a particular risk. Like, let's look at the pandemic now that we're facing. If a company would then sit down, management would sit down and say, we foresee COVID-19 impacting our company to such an extent that we shut down the offices because even one employee who's picked up the virus, we close the office.
Yes.
So and then we have to look at those risks and then formulate mitigating measures to actually say, okay, maybe we can try working remotely, not to shut the office. We can shut the office down, but the company still continues to work, where people can work remotely and then things continue. Although it will put a hamper into how operation happens, but eventually things will move. And so you look at your risk registers to say, is this risk, can it materialize anytime soon? Advise management accordingly. If it does materialize, this is what we can do. But there's also a risk that they'll always be there, but the likelihood of them materializing might not be as great. But you always keep them in your radar, because when they do, you need to have your mitigating factors in place. So yeah, in terms of remuneration, like I said, if you're a risk champion, you can, depending on the size of the company, of course, but you can look at anything between 22 to 27,000. I remember when I started at KPMG, but as an internal audit trainee, I think on my third year I was earning about 18,000 per month. So, and then it goes all the way to your chief risk officer, where you'll be looking at between 2.5 to 3 million per annum. Yeah.
Okay.
Depending on the size of the organization, of course.
No,
Yeah.
I understand. No.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
I think it was detailed and a lot of information for our young people, and that they will find it very useful.
Okay.
Please do forgive us for not wearing masks. We took it as a moment where it's an isolated area, and in order for us to be clear in the video, that we could remove the mask.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.